Well, hello everyone. Welcome once again to another Johnny Torch live broadcast. We're at broadcast number 278 today on the only way to spend your Saturday here with us on the Johnny Torch live show. So welcome in. I don't have a big broadcast for you today. I wanted to make sure I got my thoughts out on Spider-Noir. And I figured, well, we'll try to expand the show a little bit because that probably won't take me too long. So we'll add a little mini observation. I don't want to call it a rant because I don't really think it's rant material. Rant means that like I'm really worked up about something, and to be honest, this subject doesn't really have me worked up. This is just basically my observations after listening to a bunch of podcasts this week, and it kind of occurred to me this is something that I wanted to address. But of course, first, I've got that tangy lemonade I was just drinking. That probably is not great sounding for the broadcast. But here, the only way to spend your Saturday. Thank you for spending it with me. And we're going to talk first about the Adventures of Bullets, Bourbon, Private Eye, of course. The only way to spend your Saturday, but also the only comic book series that is the best little-known comic book series in the world. Now, unfortunately, I still have a lot more work to do with this issue, but we've got the beautiful cover right there. And this is part 2 of an arc called Against All Odds, as Bullets Bourbon is going up against all odds to face the mighty battery pack led by the infamous General Diesel, who is from the sovereign state of Batonia. And if you didn't know, that is a sort of a communist country that is out to take over the United States of America. Here on the 250th anniversary of this great nation of ours, we're going to let this commie come in and try to push our hero around. He ain't going to have it. And I'm sure you'll find many thrills and chills and excitement in the tale as he takes on General Diesel. Now, Bullets has also been poisoned by the General, which means that even though the General is possessing like 10 times the strength of a normal human being due to his genetically altered DNA, Bullets is also at a disadvantage because he has been poisoned by the General's apparatus, and he is now completely depleted of strength. And the poison, of course, as we find out in this issue, is he's got a ticking clock, so to speak, on his well-being. And it won't be long until he meets an unfortunate and early demise. So what is he to do? How is he going to protect his friends? As you can see here, these guys are sort of having their way with his friends, Inspector Scotch and Veronica Sinclair. And they're basically trying to protect him, but it doesn't look like they're doing a very good job of it, judging by this cover. And of course, this leads into the third issue, which is going to be called Against All Odds. That's actually the name of the third chapter. The first chapter is called Robbery, Assault, and Battery. Second chapter is called Gimme Shelter, as you see right here. And the third chapter is called Against All Odds, because that's when you're going to see the thrilling showdown, mano a mano. I'm really excited about this. This is one of my favorite stories that I've ever written. And I've said this many times. I mean, people probably think it's hype, that I'm just trying to hype it up because this is the most recent issue and I want people to know. I've been waiting, honestly. I've been doing comics for now 13 years, and I've been waiting for this one. I've been waiting for the story to come up so that I can get it out there in front of people, because this is really the most thrilling story I think I've ever told in the comics medium. It's just great interplay with the characters. I mean, we have like the 3 characters here, Bullets, Veronica, and Scotch. They all have like, not the deepest regard for one another. If you've seen the other issues in the series, you'll know why. And they kind of are forced to work together. And also you have Bullets for the first time ever at a complete disadvantage. He's not really able to stand toe to toe with a villain who, by all rights, he's got no right to be fighting in his condition. So you've got that, and you also have a pretty exciting villain in General Diesel, quite a different character than I've created before. with Carrot Top and Pencil Neck being the main villains. They're all pretty lighthearted and whimsical, but this guy is really nasty. He's a real mean piece of work. And you could see how he's basically out to humiliate his enemies. He's not content to just defeat them or get them out of his way. He wants them ground into dust. And it's a real fun character to deal with. And of course, also, as I said before, I think there's more action in this one story than probably in most of my other books, because the third issue is in this arc is dedicated to a real throwdown fight like I've never drawn before. It's sure to give the kind of excitement that you're looking for if you're looking for excitement and action in a comic. And of course, like I said, I've said this many times before too. It was something that I wanted to do, was have a torture scene with Bullets Bourbon. That was in the first issue of this arc. That's how he gets poisoned. And so again, we're charting new territory. We're getting a little bit darker. Sometimes it's fun when we get a little bit darker, because the Bullets Bourbon series is somewhat lighthearted. I mean, we take ourselves seriously enough, but it feels a lot more compelling when you get to one of these stories where it's like really life or death. And, you know, there's not going to be an easy way out of it this time. So check out The Adventures of Bullets Bourbon Private Eye. I know the 4th of July is coming up. It's a big one, the 250th anniversary of the United States. Maybe I'll see what I can do to get a sale on Global Comics. So go over to Global Comics and check it out. We'll see what we can do. You can get all the issues that are already available. And, you know, I'll see what I can do to see if I can get these into your hands. That's the digital download, so it should be very easy. If you want to order a hard copy, check out Indie Planet. The links are in the description below. And we'll just carry on now with our review of Spider-Noir. All right, so this is Spider-Noir, and honestly, I wasn't going to even review this show. I wasn't even going to watch it. But I had a free month of Amazon Prime, and I was like, Amazon Prime, honestly, they're pretty good with giving you free months, but you have to wait. You know, they'll show up like every 3, 4, 5 months with a free month. And I'm like, all right, I'll bite. Stuff like the Disney Channel, the Disney Plus, it's more difficult. I got them with a deal for like $5 for 3 months. And they're smart that way, is like they hook you by saying, oh no, wait, before you cancel your membership, how's about 3 more months for $7, you know? And and I'm like, all right, you convinced me. Amazon Prime don't really do that. They don't go out of their way to try to get you to stick around, you know, at the price of whatever, $15, $16. I'm not going to stick around for too many months. I'm going to watch what I want and then nope out. But, you know, they gave me an offer I couldn't refuse this month with a free trial. So we come to Spider-Noir, and Nicolas Cage plays the titular Spider. The character's name is not Spider-Noir. And, you know, you got to hand it to Nicolas Cage. I mean, the guy, I've called him the Lon Chaney Jr. of superheroes. He's played a version of Superman, albeit in the Flash movie, which was basically just computer generated. I think he claims that wasn't even him in that scene, even though he filmed the scene. He claims that wasn't him in the scene, I think. He played Ghost Rider, which honestly, I love the original movie Ghost Rider, and the second movie also was very good. The second movie wasn't as good, but I thought it had its good points. You know what I mean? It's sort of a darker and bleaker take on Johnny Blaze. I kind of preferred the first one, but again, he's done Marvel superheroes, he's done DC superheroes, and now he's attempting to do Spider-Man. And like I said, I really wasn't even thinking of watching this show, but I said to myself, you got the free trial, you've got Spider-Man dressed as Bullets Bourbon. What could go wrong? How could you not be interested in something like that? And boy, am I glad I did tune in, because this honestly was a very good show. And halfway through it, I was like so impressed. I was like, I really want to see more of this show. You know, I think it's like 8 episodes or something. And I was like, gee, I wish this was like a full season. The problem is though, is I don't know if it quite sticks the landing, but we'll get there in a second. First of all, obviously, uh, Nicolas Cage plays Ben Riley, which, if you know the comics, again, I don't really know the character of Spider Noir, or I know that it was in the Across the Spider Verse or whatever when they had all the different Spider characters come together. I never saw the second movie, and that I guess is going to be a trilogy. Um, but I says it, looks like a compelling character. Let me check it out. So, you know, watching it, it's sort of a period piece where, again, that's something that's like right up my alley. I like that kind of 30s Dick Tracy, King Kong, that kind of era is just great. And I love seeing something set in that. So Ben Riley, of course, in the comics was sort of the clone of Peter Parker, and they did the whole clone saga in the 90s, which honestly everybody admits was terrible. I don't know anybody who really liked what they did in the 90s with that. And they created Ben Riley as the clone of Peter Parker from the 70s, and it's a very long and involved story, but that's where that name comes from. And basically what the show does is take names from the Spider-Man show or the Spider-Man books, at large, and then uses them for their own purposes. We have Cat Hardy, which I guess is their take on Felicia Hardy. Now, she has nothing to do with Black Cat, and they race change her to being Asian, which it doesn't really matter. All they're using is the name, because none of these characters particularly look or act like the characters they're supposed to represent. We've got a version of Sandman here. They still use the name Flint Marko. I believe they use Tombstone, although again they never call him that. But I think his name was the character's name is Lonnie Lincoln. I think that's the character's real name, and they do reference him as that. So again, they're trying to sort of use Marvel's Spider-Man characters, but in a different way. I guess it's okay because it kind of works. I mean, you could have called them something else and just been like, all right, that's this version of Sandman. You don't need to call him Flint Marko. You know what I mean? They kind of could have just done that and went with it, and it would have been fine. I didn't really need them, to do that. They got Robbie Robertson, which I was kind of originally thinking, is this supposed to be like Robbie Robertson Sr., or was this Robbie Robertson when he was a young reporter? But then again, that still probably wouldn't line up, because let's say they go with the original timeline of Spider-Man in the 60s. Robbie's probably, I guess he would be about that age. I don't know. I mean, it's what I mean. It's kind of confusing if you overthink it. I prefer to think of it as, at least what I think it's supposed to be, is a Elseworlds universe where, this Robbie Robertson and this Flint Marko or whatever are the prime characters. They're not, ancestors to a modern Sandman or Spider-Man or whatever. So the beginning of the show, basically, it doesn't really feature the spider very much. And I didn't mind that. Honestly, I think that was the best part of the show, because when you are advertised a Spider-Man noir show, you kind of figure, well, Spider-Man's going to figure prominently. He doesn't really. He really doesn't have anything to do with the first 3 or 4 episodes. And what we do get, though, is we get Nicolas Cage doing sort of a Humphrey Bogart / Edward G. Robinson type character. He kind of has that kind of flair to him. He has sort of his girl Friday, Janet, which is like his secretary, which is, again, another trope from those days. And basically, I realized that a lot of the tropes that are in the show are ones that I've gladly used in my Bullets Bourbon stories. I mean, not the wisecracking secretary, but I've used, the less than honorable mayor, the sassy showgirl, the, hired muscle, the, ambitious, flamboyant reporter. He's sort of a clothes horse. I've really loved all those tropes from the 30s, and I've kind of used them myself in my own books. So when I seen them showing up here and how they played out here, I was really happy. I really enjoyed it. Now, the villain of the piece is Silvermane, which again, this is a villain that probably would never get used again. Brendan Gleeson, I believe, if I can look at the copy here. Yeah, that's the name of him. He's a familiar actor. I've seen him before in different things. I couldn't tell you right now off the top of my head, but he makes for a great villain of the story. And Silvermane, again, a character, he's like an arthritic old gangster boss from the Spider-Man comics, I think particularly the early 70s, sort of set up as a rival to Kingpin, I think. And again, it was a great choice of villain for this type of story. And he played it very well. And a lot of the dialogue was something that I really enjoyed. You get the rat-a-tat dialogue, like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but like, for instance, I think Riley is talking to Kat, and he's like, I don't like surprises. And she's like, well, I'll remember that for your birthday. And it's like that great 30s dialogue that, you know, is delivered in such a deadpan style that, and I mean, I've tried to write that in a lot of my books, and sometimes, you know, just on the printed page, you can't get that effect, but you really get it in this show. And they try to, you know, give you that kind of 30s detective style. And so I really enjoyed that. And so then when they came to the Spider, now again, I'm not really going deep into the storyline, but the storyline has it that Ben gave up being the Spider when his, I think his fiance died because he was out celebrating. And by the time he tried to save her, because I guess someone, I'm not sure, someone revenge killed her by trapping her in a sinking car or something. And he blames himself, and he doesn't want to put on the costume again, and he hasn't for like 5 years. And this case brings him back to being the Spider. And as the Spider, it's a lot of fun. You know, he's, you know, different from the Peter Parker Spider. He's not quite as athletic. We don't see him sort of jumping around and hanging around upside down and stuff very much. It's mostly just him doing like faster than human movements and sort of abnormal, you know, jumping and stuff like that. So it's not overly CGI laden, I wouldn't say. There's like 2 or 3 episodes where they deal with him maybe being the focus, the action of him being the focus. But as it turns out, these other people with powers, I don't know if they call them anything other than that, show up, such as the Sandman, such as Megawatt, which, before I go any further, I have to say Megawatt was the most hammy performance I've ever seen. And that's saying something. There was Metallo on Superboy. And I always thought that was probably the hammiest performance you're ever going to see. I remember Madam Hydra, I think, from the Nick Fury movie with David Hasselhoff, one of the hammiest performances I've ever seen. But this guy that played Megawatt, honestly, had to be the most hammiest. And again, they probably asked him to do this. I mean, it's not like, you know, this guy just took over the show and decided, hey, I'm going to ham it up and shoot every scene until it was in tatters. But he does. And, you know, it's good to a point. I think at a certain point, I was like, all right, dial it back, dude. You know, you're not Jim Carrey. You know what I mean? Not every bit of this is, you know, screen worthy. You know, you can dial it back a little bit. But again, you know, I'm not against the colorful and the ham-fisted, but there is at some point a line that can be crossed, and I think that maybe they should have overthought a little bit of what he was doing. And again, of course, Tombstone, and it all ties into a experimentation that was going on during World War I, and Ben goes back to that where they were all experimented on. And this is the part where they kind of lost me. I'm going to say that this was, it gets a passing review from me. It gets a passing grade, but I don't like body horror. And this is kind of what they started getting into, where there's a guy that's half spider, half human, and it's like schlock horror type stuff. And there's a sort of mad scientist woman who's keeping the bodies of these guys still in stasis or whatever, that they're dead, but they're being experimented on. And it's like that kind of had it grind to a halt for me. And then Nicolas Cage starts doing his Nicolas Cage things. Like, if you ever seen, like, for instance, if you saw Ghost Rider 2, it's basically like that on acid. You know what I mean? He's doing these weird, what I could best describe as like spider pose calisthenics. I don't really know how else to describe it, but he does like these herky jerky motions, and then he like spends 2 episodes drunk. And I feel like they kind of dropped the ball at that point. And I was like, we could have honestly, I mean, because like I said, a lot of people feel like 8 episodes is not enough of a show. I feel like they kind of wasted 3 episodes of this show, and they could have kind of combined the idea of maybe 2 or 3 of those episodes into one. And you got rid of some of that stuff, because some of that stuff was just was not to my taste. Let's put it that way. Another interesting thing, we've seen Andrew Robinson as a part here. I recognize him immediately as an older fella. What was that? I don't know. And it's pretty interesting to see him still getting these kind of roles. The first thing I remember from him was he was in Dirty Harry, I think, is the villain. But I remember seeing him play the villain against another Marvel hero back in the 70s, which was the Incredible Hulk, when he tries to perform some kind of brain experimentation on Dr. David Banner. And of course, the Hulk has to step in. So his career's come full circle, I guess. Very interesting there. The last episode kind of ties everything up. It's a little bit messy. It's a little bit unwieldy. We have Robbie. Well, spoilers, of course, now. Robbie, who was a fun character. I enjoyed him. He's sort of disguising himself as the spider, and he's got the antidotes for these villains. And it's kind of predictable. You kind of know what's going to happen. I mean, I don't mind that so much. But and then sort of they leave Kat to take care of Silvermane, because she was put upon all those years being under his thumb, and so like she's the one to do him in. Kind of fell flat to me. I mean, she never sort of came across as being that capable, honestly, and she's the one to kill him. I don't know. That kind of fell flat. So again, they didn't really. I don't want to say they didn't stick the landing. I found it interesting as well. The way they end it between Kat and Ben, I've just found it laugh out loud funny. I don't know if that's what they were going for, and I still wonder to this day, is that exactly what they were going for? Their last interaction. Let's put it this way, it's less than romantic, and I wasn't expecting him to wind up with Kat, but I didn't really expect them to leave on such terms. But again, the case is closed, and sort of he has to soldier on. People, I suppose, if people want to say, is this woke, because that seems to be the main question everybody asks about everything. I wouldn't say it's woke, but they do little things like that where Kat ends up taking out Silvermane, and I think, what's her name, Janet, ends up being a partner of Ben in the detective agency. They have a very racially diverse cast, if you want to signal that out. I mean, like, Kat Hardy is Asian, and Robbie Robertson, obviously, they have the reporter is black. Janet is Latino, I think. So, I mean, there's like a lot of, diversity that was probably demanded by the studio or something, seeing as how this is Amazon Prime. I I wouldn't call it woke though story wise. It seems pretty clear cut. I mean, you get like maybe one or two instances of them acting like, a black man is being persecuted sort of for you know not legitimate reasons. I mean, that kind of did go on in history. I mean, I don't really think that counts as woke that they mention that like once or twice. So I mean, if you want to call it woke, I mean, it's maybe only woke in so much as that I feel like they were checking boxes to make sure that there was a diverse cast. But I mean, apart from that, I mean, not really. I mean, I think if they were doing this show like pre woke era, that the girl that played Ben's fiance or whatever that died, the pretty blonde, she probably would have played the Cat Hardy part. But it's like, we have to delegate, uh, a biracial cast across the line, and so that's the reason why. But again, I mean, if they're not the actual Felicia Hardy and they're not the actual Flint Marco, I mean, I don't really care what they look like. This is just sort of using the name as a, I don't know, a placeholder because this is in the Spider-Man universe. But yeah, to wrap this up, I'm gonna give Spider-Noir, I'm gonna give it a B. Maybe 3.5 stars out of 5. Again, ironically, once the spider showed up, I felt like the show turned into something else. And I would honestly have given, if you cut out, like I said, 2 or 3 episodes and try to sort of rework them, I probably would have gave this an 8 out of 10. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 on that. I would definitely be there for a second season. I would like to see a second season. I think they've got a pretty good thing going here. I mean, again, you like 30 style, Dick Tracy meets King Kong meets, whatever else would be a good period piece for around there. That setting, it's a lot of fun, and I like the look of the character. Obviously, I mean, like I said, it's basically Spider-Man dressed as Bullets Bourbon, and Nicolas Cage. He's savvy with something like this. He knows how to get the best out of it that you can get out of a scenario like this, of a concept like this, and he did very well. Yeah, so I would give it a passing grade. And let me know what you think in the comments below on Spider-Noir. And so, as we continue on here, I will get to our next story here. And this is not a story. This is, like I said, not really a rant, but I'm calling this a quote from the Bible, Ecclesiastes 1:9. This is from King Solomon. King Solomon. And he said, "What has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun." Now, I've been wanting to do a Bible topic for a while now, but this isn't really going to be something that is going back to the Bible, other than to remind people that everything that's been done now has been done before, and there's nothing new under the sun. Now, I was listening, like I said, to a bunch of podcasts and YouTube videos, and it seemed like there was a thread going through what I was listening to. Out of the 3, I think I listened to 3 or 4 that were talking about the same subject. And so I wanted to do some kind of, again, not a rant, but sort of my meditation on this subject. Because, like, for instance, one of the ones I listened to was your boy Zach. I still listen to your boy Zach, even though I know a lot of people are not fond of him. They think he's gone off the deep end. He's ironically one of the few people that I agree with that believes that the usual suspects are losers, that, we're going to beat into the ground, that Supergirl is going to be horrible. We haven't seen it yet, but we know Millie Alcock hates us, and that film is going to be a disaster. And if you go see it, then there's something wrong with you. I mean, again, that's a horse that's been beaten so dead, it's embarrassing. And I just go and see the movie, or if you don't like what you've seen or heard by now, don't. But stop beating this dead horse. Honestly, it's getting ridiculous. And as I said on Twitter today, it's like on the one hand, people are saying, well, Supergirl's getting, mildly enthusiastic reviews, but you're not supposed to listen to them because they're all paid shills. But then again, there's the subset of internet influencers who have been saying for the past 6 months that this film is going to be terrible and James Gunn doesn't know how to do anything other than Guardians of the Galaxy and Millie Alcock hates you. And so we're supposed to listen to them, right? We're supposed to listen to them. Anyway, I digress. But again, going back to what I was saying about your boy Zach, and he's got like this very cynical edge, and his whole thing recently is I don't want to hear from any 50-year-olds. All the 50-year-olds shut up. Your day is over. You're a man, baby, and whatever. And I don't agree with that. And then there's the other side when I listen to 2 or 3 other guys I know and like, and it's usually the opposite. It's like, well, they don't respect us. Why don't they respect us? We're the audience for these films. We grew up with Superman and He-Man, and why are they disrespecting us? They don't want us. Why don't they want us? And I feel like the issue is somewhere in the middle, because what's happening to us now, as the middle-aged guys, the middle-aged fans, is nothing shocking or strange, because this happens in practically every generation. I mean, every generation thinks that the generation after them is being disrespectful, is being, sort of ignoring their wisdom, their advice. And it's something that I think every generation has gone through, at least in recent memory. Your grandparents went through what's the matter with kids today? What was that from Bye Bye Birdie? Back then it was, punks and hot rods and, the Blackboard Jungle and all that stuff. I mean, they went through that phase as well, where it was, why are our kids in this generation being so disrespectful to us? And, rebel without a cause and all that stuff. And then, you get into like my parents' generation, where it was, never trust anybody over 30. And they had to deal with that. They had a generation where, they were obviously, anti-war and became hippies and all this and all that. So what I'm trying to say is, I think every generation has dealt with this. There's nothing new under the sun. You're not going to, you're not going to be well respected and well thought of, no matter what. I don't think there's any kind of political agenda in that, other than that's the way life is. And unfortunately, we're getting to the age now, Gen X, that we're in that spot now when we say, we want you to respect, our properties. We want you to respect Star Wars and He-Man and Superman. And we did so great with them when we were kids. Why aren't they respecting us? Well, they're never going to, because they never respect the generation that precedes them. I don't feel like that is something that is, like I said, strange or to be unexpected. That's kind of what happens. Now, I don't think that it's right. I don't think like your boy Zach does, which is like, just shut up and go away now. Your day is over. But at the same time, I don't feel like we need to feel like, the next generation is going to necessarily owe us their respect. It's not going to happen, because it's never been that way, and it's probably never going to be that way. Now, were we, disrespectful to the previous generation? That's up for debate. I don't know. I don't think Gen X really disliked any of the stuff from the previous generation. But, that's the problem with time marching on, because new people, usually younger people, get involved in these things. They don't carry over the same ideals and beliefs that you had, and it just doesn't happen. Now, like, for instance, this is another thing I talked about on Twitter, where nowadays it's like a movie can't be 75% there. I said, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago now in my He-Man, the Masters of the Universe review that He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, at least that's why I call it, the most recent movie, was like 70% what I wanted. Now, I give that a passing grade, but people are like, that's not good enough for them now. Well, given the people that are involved and the time frame that we're making these in, I think that's a passing grade. I mean, Superman, I would say that was 75% there. Last year's Superman, Fantastic Four, that was about 70% there. But you have people acting like they're terrible movies and, because they weren't 100% what you wanted. Chances are, though, if you went back to whatever, 1978, when the original Superman movie came out, you'd have had your handful of complaints there, too. You would have, like, Krypton, why does it look the way it does? Jor-El is supposed to wear a headband and a green suit with the sun on it. And you know what I mean? You can't really put yourself in that place because you grew up with it in a certain way. So if Superman doesn't look to you like you think it should look to you, or He-Man doesn't look to you like you think it should look to you, it's because as time moves on, these things become a product of their time. And it's almost impossible because, like I said, I think we've been spoiled that Phase 1 was so good. They got it pretty much every movie pitch perfect. Raimi got Spider-Man pitch perfect. Nolan, at least for Batman Begins, had a very strong origin for Batman. We were spoiled with these things at the turn of the century, but again, you can't always expect that every time out because they're not going to just completely copy what's come before. And when they do, like in the case of The Force Awakens or Superman Returns, it's always a pale and, bloated shadow of what the original one was. Now, before we close, I do have another portion of this rumination that I've had, which is when you consider that there's nothing new under the sun, you have to also remember that that also applies to the woke era. Now, I know a lot of people think that the woke era isn't over. They're still fighting the culture war. The good fight is on. But the thing is that the world exists in a cycle. The cycle is always coming around. And that's why I think that the woke era is pretty much on its way out. Because you go back, as far back as I can go is 100 years ago. In the roaring 20s, it was anything goes, and flappers, and they were wearing short dresses, and Cole Porter's song, basically anything goes, was, I guess that was like in the early 30s, was sort of like an indictment of the roaring 20s. And in the 30s, you had, they were pre-code movies, they were called, because the Hays Code wasn't instituted yet. And they got away with a lot of frisky stuff. I remember, one of my favorite movies that I even did a review on for the horror movies in my playlist is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And that was like really frisky stuff for the 1930s. And I love watching that stuff because most of the time, and there are exceptions, most of the time they don't go over the line, but it was stuff that was, again, being a little too free with your freedom, you know what I mean? So then the Hays Code comes in, and they're not really allowed to get that frisky. They're not allowed to get that suggestive, let's say. And that really wasn't too much of a problem because smart directors and writers can get around the idea without having to go full bore on it. And again, that was kind of a form of censorship because there was too much, in a sense, too much freedom to do what they wanted before the Hays Code. And so that carried on basically for another generation. And it's like I said, it's like a generational thing. There's always going to be the ebbs and flows. There's the hills and valleys. There's going to be a lot of permissiveness. Then there's going to be a lot of tamping down on the permissiveness. You're going to have what happened next. There was about a good 30 years then of, the conservative type of, the family sitcoms and the, good, clean westerns and stuff like that. And then what happened? Then we have the '60s come in, and then by the end of the '60s, we have a complete counterculture. We have again the hippie movement. We have at the beginning of the '70s, mostly is when all this stuff really took place. Is the the sitcom was sort of changed into, you have the All in the Family, you have all the sort of urban dynamics, the Good Times and the Jeffersons and all this stuff that's supposed to reflect a more freer society. You're talking freer about things that were going on. And then of course the movies in the '70s, when you had like the Dirty Harrys and the um, Midnight Express, and all this stuff in the '70s, where there was just like no, it was like, to me, the '70s, though there was great movies, it was like a way too much permissiveness. You could see any form of degeneracy in the movies. It was like, you know it's like anything they wanted to do, they did. And you had you know I can't even remember half the movies, but then we get to a point of uh when Rocky came out. I think Rocky was really the first one that did this, because Sylvester Stallone said, "Look, I want to have a film that's a good crowd pleaser. I want to have, a good role model character." And then you started to see these kind of films trickling in with George Lucas, with Star Wars, and you've seen uh, Superman, which was the all American story. And then you started seeing things turn in the other direction. After like a good 10, 15 years, we started seeing things turn in the other direction. And then, of course, going through the end of the '70s through the '80s, then you had, a freer hand at things, the Dukes of Hazzard and the A Team, and a much more conservative flow in media and entertainment. And then you go on in through the '90s and the 2000s, and things become slightly politically incorrect. So you got politically incorrectness waiting in the wings, but then you still have a lot of permissiveness. We've got the Baywatches and the Married with Children, and then we've got the WWE being practically R-rated. Then we've got by the beginning of the 2000s, it was the Two and a Half Men and those kind of shows. And then you sort of could see where it was going to shift again. We got to pay the piper. Now the woke era starts. And this has been going on for probably about 20 years now. And you could see it's a complete overreaction to the permissiveness of the previous 20 years. And it's just a cycle that continues to go around. Now, as far as where we are now, the woke era is nearly over. And I feel like there's just a few things in the pipeline. And again, I don't know to what extent that we're going to fully break from the sort of woke trappings in entertainment. Some of these things are probably never going away. I mean, I don't know if we're ever going to get no race changes whatsoever. I don't know if we're ever going to get, you know, you know, female suits that show bare legs, like Tila is not allowed to in the Masters of the Universe movie. That stuff, I don't know if that's ever going to go away. But I think the permissiveness and again, with the woke era, it was a little more difficult, because not only was it overly puritanical with things like that, but it was also bringing in and fostering its own form of degeneracy. And the rainbow people and things like that, which I'm not going to get into because I don't want to get the channel flagged. But I mean, it's something that is to use a term that I don't know if completely is applicable, but sort of a yin and yang. There's like, once we go around one way, then it comes out the other way. We're in the white now, then we're in the black, and then we turn around again. And I feel like this is the way it is. And that's the reason why the woke era is not going to last forever. We are already seeing it in its dying stages. And I'm pretty sure that, when people act like, well, it's never going to be the same again, and this and that. Well, you don't know that. You really don't. Because if history is any kind of barometer for us, it's pretty obvious that things like this don't stay in one tone. You know what I mean? We go back and forth. And I think it depends on how far along one side we are when the pendulum swings, that how long it's going to take. And so it's been pushing to the other side now for a while. I think the last really woke year was what, 2022 maybe? And it's been starting to come out the other end. And I think what happened is, the woke era, these companies are not being rewarded anymore. I always bring it back to Obama and how they were rewarded for, these companies were rewarded for DEI and all this and all that. They're not getting that anymore under Trump. A lot of that stuff is gone. And so that's why you're starting to see a freer hand with a lot of these things. And again, I don't think necessarily the next generation is going to be woke. I think if anything, they want to be freed from the woke as much as anybody. Because again, a lot of people fondly look back, like we did, at the generation before us and what they had and what they enjoyed. And I think especially when they see the freedom we had, as Gen X or as the previous generation, they're going to want that. They're going to want to say, why do we have to have these restrictions on us? Why do we have to play ball this way with a certain set of rules that is ridiculous? I mean, you can't, get a Oscar award unless you've had 15 boxes ticked. And, eventually these things are going to come to roost, as the old saying goes. So, I mean, again, it's not really a rant, but it's just an observation I had because, like I said, I hear a lot of this sort of like this generational shift now that, like, well, the woke era is sort of dooming the future and guys our age should just shut up. Well, no, I mean, I don't agree with any of that. I think it's pretty much basically, to quote my favorite band, Genesis, and the song The Way of the World. If you've never heard that, that's a great one. It's like, the world's been here before, just spinning round and round. There's right, there's wrong, there's weak and there's strong. It's just the way of the world. And that's the way it's always going to be. And that's basically what the song says. So once again, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the subject. Let me know in the comments below. And that's about it for this edition of the Johnny Torch Live broadcast. I don't know, maybe I might separate the Spider-Noir review to put on my superhero review playlist in case people are not interested in my musings here. But make sure you like, share, and subscribe if that is your bag. If not, thank you for at least listening and partaking of the show. Always a pleasure to be here with you fine folks. And once again, until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch reminding you, once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.